Oh, that's fucking way too much. What just happened there? I don't know. See, sometimes it happens to me too, Robbie. It's not just you. We blocked out your pose and everything.
Let me just hold it up for another few moments.
Oh God. Okay. All right. Are you done? Are you good now? Do the thing. Do the AC Max special. He's the only one that ever told you he liked this. Okay, there you go.
Nick,
get your shine, kid.
How you doing, dude?
Dude, it's been a week, man. Whole family full of sick kids and sick wife. Had to postpone this interview for like 4 days. Thank God our guest was cool and wasn't like, nope, not doing it now, assholes.
Yeah. Unprofessional motherfuckers. I was gonna say, dude, I haven't podcast for like 2 weeks with you.
Yeah, man. Yeah, because we didn't do. I mean, it's been basically 2 weeks.
Yeah, well,
but we got like 2 this week, boys. So
feels like forever, though. Do you
We're coming right back in 2 days. This shit's gonna drop on Wednesday. The other episode's gonna drop on Friday. So if you like the Uncut Podcast, you're gonna get your fill this week. Unfortunately, we missed out on JC Crow a couple weeks ago. He will reschedule. He had a whole bunch of shit going on. The Nick Iggy episode was a fucking banger. So that was cool. And I gotta say, shout out to our friends at IWTV, our friends at Subgraps, for fulfilling my wish of booking Nick Iggy for the next Subgrap show, sponsored by your boys at the Uncut Podcast.
Nice.
And giving us Nick Iggy June the 19th at You Are Freaking Me Out. I will obviously be in attendance. Come find me. Buy me vodka crayons. It'll be great.
If I could, I would, yo.
Dude, I mean, I had a great time at the last one, New Direction. I'm sure You Are Freaking Me Out. It's going to be along the same lines. We're going to have probably Dylan Hales or a representative thereof of Subgraps on the Thursday before the show. So we'll definitely do a big preview for that with Isaiah Broner versus Dominic Garini's on that show. Debut of Rip F and Bison taking on Noah Hossman. Yeah, Noah Hossman. There's a lot on that show. One of the first women's matches in Sup history is going to be on that show, but we'll get there. That's in like 3 weeks. We already got this week planned out. We have a major guest booked for June the 9th. But tonight, the Generalissimo is here. You will enjoy this show, or you will be shunned. Because tonight, we interview Merc.
Another one bites the dust.
Wow, dude.
Shout out to our boy TJ Vegas from the Indy movement. Another killer video this week. Merc, welcome to the Uncut Podcast, my friend.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Dude, in watching that video and doing a little bit of research coming into this show, I think you hold the record for having the most opponents that have also appeared on the Uncut Podcast. Between Nick Iggy last night, because we're filming this on Tuesday, the night after Uncharted Territory, John Wayne Murdoch. Who else? I thought of one. And then the first match that the Uncut Podcast ever sponsored was actually you taking on Manders. So at Subgraps back in October, November.
Yeah.
So
October, yeah.
So yeah, I think that might be you.
Hell yeah.
You're now the common thread of the Uncut Podcast, my friend.
That's a position I've held in independent wrestling at this level for a while.
You've been everywhere over the last few years. But what was the moment when you were growing up as a fan that you realized you wanted to be a professional wrestler?
There wasn't really a moment. I remember at school in kindergarten, they'd asked us what we wanted to be when we grew up, and I didn't know. And I'd just been watching wrestling for a few months with my brother. And I do remember a moment where Stone Cold gave D'Lo Brown a stunner. I remember everyone in the background, like from Hard Can side, stood up. And I was just like, hey, I could do this. I like wrestling. I'll do this. Yeah. So I decided that's what I was going to do.
Nice.
All right. So let's go back to that, being a wrestling fan. So what was your first moment? What was your first memory of professional wrestling?
That's tough because I remember my brother had Warrior and Hogan wrestling buddies when we were. He's 9 years older than me, so I remember he had those. But I knew who Hogan was. I didn't really know who Warrior was. But for Christmas of '97, my mom got us a PlayStation, and one of the games she got for us was In Your House, and so that was really my introduction into like all these guys, Razor Ramon and Owen Hart and Bret Hart and Stone Cold and Doink. And a lot of those guys I never even watched because the wrestling business moves so fast. Like I never saw a Razor Ramon match on TV or even like a Shawn Michaels one, or Undertaker in that game was still wearing the purple gloves and stuff.
Yeah.
So a lot of those guys I got familiar with them, but once we started watching, which would have been a few months later or something, a lot of those guys were gone. But I remember the first thing I saw on TV was like Vader's head in a plastic trash can. I don't know what the segment was, but that's just an image that stood out to me. So
all I can say is, dude, what a great time to become a wrestling fan, dude.
That was like,
my first vision memories of professional wrestling was a sweaty Greg the Hammer Valentine in a battle royal.
That strangely makes you make so much more sense, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't think Valentine was ever not sweaty.
No, just sweaty and fucking snug. So, who were your favorites growing up, and who kind of influenced you early on? Before you started training guys, where you were like, I think if I was a wrestler, I'd be kind of like him.
My first favorite, I'm pretty sure, was Stone Cold Steve Austin. If I'm 5 years old in 1997, I don't see how it could be anyone else. But I liked a lot of them. I was a big babyface guy, and I still usually am. I can appreciate heels more now, but as a kid, I always liked the good guys, and I liked the smaller guys because in my class, I was one of the smaller kids. So I really liked X-Pac. I thought he was my favorite of DX, like by far, because he was the little one, and he would do the kicks, and he'd jump when he did the suck it. Like he just stood out. He was different. And but my absolute number one as a kid, and even to this day, my number one all-time favorite, because your favorite wrestler when you're 5 is your favorite wrestler for the rest of your life. That's just how it is Goldberg.
Okay. All right.
He
explain this. I like Goldberg, but I just want to hear his rush.
He won. So I was like, well, that's the fucking guy.
That's the one, right?
Goldberg. And I've stayed a Goldberg kid.
People to this day question Eric Bischoff for doing that, dude. And I got a fan out of it right here.
Well, I mean, not only that, but like you can't argue that it worked.
Yeah.
Michael Jordan was the most marketable athlete of the entire 90s, except for like 98, where like Goldberg eked him out by like just a little bit, and like more than Stone Cold, even like as much of a phenomenon as Stone Cold was. Like Goldberg, he was a phenom. He's the WCW phenom. And like I was a WWF kid too. I was Raw over Nitro and all that, but I'd watch both as best I could. But Goldberg was the guy for me. But Jeff Hardy was another big one, and I definitely saw myself doing more of his stuff than I did Goldberg's as a kid. And as I got older and like thought about like who would influence me and stuff, Jeff remained pretty high on that list. I really became a big HBK fan. And as I've wrestled, I've only appreciated Shawn Michaels more. I really liked Benoit early on. Benoit was one of those guys where I didn't realize how much I liked him until I think like 2006 7 or something, he was off TV for several months, and he came back against like William Regal or something at a pay-per-view. I was like, man, he has been gone a while. I really like all the stuff he does. I guess I really like Benoit because I always like the headbutt and the Germans and the crossface. To this day is probably my favorite submission finish. But I don't know, my influences as far as in-ring style and how I work, they've changed a lot over the years. They've changed with the guys that have come up and how my perspective on putting matches together and stuff have gone. So there's so many guys I can pull from. Like, it'd be impossible to name all of them.
Well, I watching your entrance video, which was awesome. Again, dude, TJ Vegas did a great job on that. You're very athletic, dude. You must have played some kind of sports in high school. What was your amateur background in sports? High school, college, anything like that?
No,
nothing. You didn't play basketball out on the blacktop, soccer, football,
mostly trampoline wrestling.
Really. Well, when did you start? When did you got a great physique, man? So like, when did you start like training your body, like working out and stuff?
I started like working out my freshman year of high school for wrestling. Essentially, like I knew like that'd be something I needed to do. And it's really funny because me and my friend went there and I had no idea what to do. We were just at the YMCA in town and they had a pretty decent gym especially no bigger than our town was. And there's just this old army dude there. I remember his name was Terry, but he's like in his 50s and he wasn't huge and he wasn't completely shredded, but you could tell he's in really good shape, especially for a dude that old. And he just kind of took us around like each of the machines and like he could tell we were lost and just kind of explained what each one did and how to use them properly and everything. And I never saw him again after that day. But that was like the very base foundation of just knowing how to use the tricep extensions and the Smith press and stuff like that. I was pretty unguided throughout most of high school, and being a teenager, my nutrition wasn't really on point. But for like 4 or 3.5 years almost, I went 5 days a week and worked out for close to 2 hours because I do 2 body parts a day, 5 days a week. So there's probably a little bit of overtraining done there, but it was towards that last year, I stopped working out for like a year because I graduated and moved in with my dad in a different town, and I had a hard time finding a job. So I didn't really have access to a gym for a while, and I've been just here and there with it. The diet's the hard part of like fitness. Ask anyone, and like I come from a stock of like just fat dudes. Like there's not a nice way to put it. Like,
are we related, yo?
I've got fat guy genes, no doubt. So, but also I'm real bad about bouncing from like program to program. If I could ever like really stick with something, which is what I've been able to do the past year or so, I've gone on these 8 or 12 week programs with specific goals. But I mean, just consistency is more the key of anything, because I've had periods where I've worked out pretty solidly and then fallen off. And if you go back and you really want to look, you can see where those periods are in my wrestling. But past several months, I've been super consistent. And I'm pretty happy with how I'm looking and how I'm feeling foremost. That's another big thing because I just turned 30 in March. So when you get to that age, working out in a way that's going to strengthen and protect your body as opposed to like just going for aesthetics is real important.
Yeah, I think people don't realize 30 in wrestling age is like you've taken your fair share of ass kickings already. So you really got to...
You've been wrestling since you were 19, you know, like my body was still not fully developed at the time I was taking crazy bumps and stuff, you know? So like, I mean, I feel it. And I feel it being in a car more than I feel most bumps. I've felt being in a car as much as I have. But luckily there's a friend of mine that lives in Oklahoma where I do, and he was a wrestler locally. He's a personal trainer now, but he specifically crafts programs for wrestlers and how to have quality athletic standards and health for joints, back, all these things, like eliminate a lot of the problems that wrestlers historically have had with their bodies over just because they've really not known how to take care of them. You can't do bodybuilding for an athlete's body. Like bodybuilding works for bodybuilding, but for a combat athlete, which is the same kind of training you do for professional wrestling, I mean, that'll just wear you down.
Yeah. So going from working out in high school and doing the trampoline wrestling, what was the transition into actually training to be a professional wrestler?
My plan was to go to Harley Race's school because I was from Southwest Missouri, and his school was about an hour and a half just north of where I lived. But like I said, I had a hard time getting a job, and his tuition was $3,000,
Right.
and I couldn't get enough saved. Like I tried and tried, and this was 2011, so like still kind of coming out of that 2008 recession and everything, like, and having no work experience because the small town I lived in when I was in high school growing up, there was really nowhere to work. So for about a year after high school, I worked when I could. I did some temp jobs, had a seasonal job, and I didn't have enough saved, and it was driving me crazy that I hadn't started training. Because again, it's all I've thought about since I was 5. And I'd not gone to college so that I could be a wrestler. I'd skipped all the extracurriculars at school so I could be a wrestler. And I wasn't training to be a wrestler, and I hated it. So I was looking around for alternative schools, just something that could get me started. And I looked for a solid month. I'd Google just schools here. And then I'd factor in tuition versus how far away it was versus, how far I could drive to it or whatever. And I'd given up. And then like the day after, I was just like, well, I guess I'll just keep looking for a job and eventually I'll go. I found an advertisement for this tryout in Bucyrus, Kansas, which is like 30 minutes south of Kansas City. And I called them and they were like, yeah, I build wrestling rings and cages for a living. I used to work back in the day, and I've had a lot of guys recently approached me about training, and I've kind of blown it off. But since there's enough interest, I've just kind of put this up, and it'll be, I think it was like $200. If I passed the tryout, it was $200 down and $100 a month, which is really affordable for wrestling training. Too affordable for wrestling training.
Yeah.
But me and my dad would go to Harley Race's shows all the time, and there was one of the guys this dude Mark Sterling, not AEW smart Mark Sterling, a different Mark Sterling, who knew me from a tryout I'd done like the year before. I'd gone up to Ottawa, Kansas. My dad had driven me up there when I was 17, and I did like this one-day tryout that we can get into that later. Wasn't even supposed to be like a tryout. The promoter like lied to me about what it was. But Sterling was cool enough to have me do the cardio and show me some bumps and stuff. So we'd see him at shows, and he'd remember me and ask me how stuff was going. And he gave me the okay for this guy's school that I was going to, the guy who trained me, Chad Sullivan. So I passed my tryout there, and I started training, and I trained for about 4 weeks before I had my first match in Ottawa, Kansas. And about 3 months after that, his school closed down because his business of building rings and cages had gotten so busy he didn't have time or space. He had to clear out the area where the ring was set up to create more workspace. And from then on, me and the guy I trained with, who would become my tag partner, Luke Langley, were just kind of on our own.
First year that you're in a wrestling school, your first year in wrestling in the business, was there any point in time where you wanted to give it up and quit?
No.
Well, then not different question. In that first year, what was the hardest thing?
Hardest thing was figuring out how to reach out to promotions, I think. And that's still something I have a hard time with. I'm very good at the in-ring portion of professional wrestling. I'm very good at the art and the science of professional wrestling. I'm not very good at the business of professional wrestling, and I never have been. And quite frankly, it's not an aspect that particularly interests me. When I got into wrestling, I figured, and at the level I was at, it did kind of work this way for a while, was you have matches somewhere and you get better, and you send those better matches somewhere else, and you go work a little bit higher level promotion and get better, and you'd progressively get better and send the footage to better places and continuously go better places, and so on and so forth. And that cycle should continue until you've kind of peaked. That's not necessarily that it's not quite that simple, unfortunately. Not that that's necessarily the easiest way, but it's not that simple. Just because I'm very introverted naturally, I've had a lot of the hooligans. I can credit them a lot with me coming out of my shell as much as I have. We can talk about being on the road with them, but just reaching out and like not hearing back was weird for me. Like, it's something I'm kind of used to now, is being left on red or promoters not even reading. But back then it was a weird thing for my brain to kind of process. Was like, man, they've seen this, or I've sent it and they haven't even got back to me. It was a weird, it was weird. And I would struggle with that, because then like all my leads had gone to dead ends. I didn't have any connections at the time. I hadn't been around enough to have networked yet.
Yeah.
So I'd say that was the biggest struggle, is just finding new places. But eventually me and Luke got into Oklahoma, and at the time there was a lot of quantity in Oklahoma. And so we kind of made that our stomping grounds for a while, and kind of residually to this day, it's kind of always where we tend to boomerang back to in some form or fashion.
Well, it's good to have that home base, though, if nothing else. Like,
for sure is. It's not the best area for wrestling, for sure, because just like in every other aspect, Oklahoma is just a shittier Texas in a lot of ways. There are a lot of promotions around here. The main problem with Oklahoma actually was never the level of potential talent that was here, is that there were no real vets. Right. Once OPW and Bull Schmidt kind of shut down, because he was one of Harley's guys and he'd been over to Japan and worked for Noah a lot. But once he was kind of out of it, there was no one who would go out and travel. There was no reputable trainers here. And to this day, there's still not like anyone, a school I would say is qualified to train someone start to finish to be a pro wrestler. But it got us reps. It got me and Luke. We worked. It's weird being like 6 months into wrestling and walking into companies and being the best wrestler there. There's a lot of pros and cons to that. Obviously, that helps us get pushed pretty quickly right away a lot of places. And I'd say the biggest positive is something I'm still very good at today, is learning how to work around people's limitations. Because, I mean, you've been to the Tennessee Indies. They're very a lot. There's a lot of guys who their gimmick is, I'm very fat, so I guess I'm very strong, because that's all I do. And
I'm very big, so I don't have to sell.
I have to sell. And even beyond that, like I remember specifically, there's this one that comes to mind when you said that, is there was this guy, Kyle Everlast was his name, because he wore an Everlast wrestling singlet. Kyle Everlast, he was like 6'2", probably close to 370, and just fat, not athletic at all. And my buddy Brett was wrestling him, who was probably about 6'1" and right at 300, but still had, a 70-pound deficit. And in the middle of the match, they wanted to do a bump and feed. I just like, I don't think you guys should do that. I think that's more towards the end of the match. And Kyle, you shouldn't bump and feed for the comeback. I was like, well, I look weak. I was like, well, you're 70 pounds bigger than him. there's a lot of that, like having to work around, like not only guys that didn't want to do enough, but guys who wanted to do too much in the wrong way.
Yeah.
I still think that's a big takeaway that I apply a lot of today. I think it's why I'm good. I have some of my best matches against greener wrestlers a lot of time, because I'm able to their limitations kind of help reel myself in sometimes, because I get excited about wrestling. I like it. I only get to do it a handful of times a week. So I want to do I get excited. I want to do more than I should a lot. And when they can't do as much, it helps me reel myself in. So, and then obviously the cons of that is that you're only going to get so good working guys who aren't better than you. Right. And I'd say that's probably the biggest obstacle I've had in my career, weirdly, is I've not had tons of opportunities to work guys as good or better than me. It's really only in the last few years when I've been around the Southeast consistently that's happened on a consistent basis, where I've been able to wrestle guys like Eric Royal and Anthony Henry and Brett Eisen and guys like that. And like Manders, me and him have insane chemistry. Because before that, it was few and far between. Like, I remember me and Luke were super excited when we got to work the Ugly Ducklings in New York. That was the first time I'd ever worked Rob. And I worked a ton of times now, and I'm a better wrestler for it. But there's a period there where we just kind of had to push ourselves, because even when we were moving up company-wise, we would still kind of get, I don't even want to say stuck with, but we just happened to get slotted in against guys we had more experience than, or had more athleticism than. And I'm trying to find the right word, because it's not even reputation, just the kind of niche we'd carved out for ourselves as nomads, which is kind of where the mercenary gimmick itself came from. We didn't have a lot of home bases. We would just travel around because we were trying to get out there, get our name out there, be as many places as we could. And I did that once I prioritized singles wrestling too. So when you do that, you do get slotted in against the greener guys or the newer guys. And when you don't establish those roots, you don't work the guys at the top of the card. And that's like an unintended consequence of getting out almost too much.
I think it was you, wasn't it you, Nick?
I hope it's me, because I had one in mind. Where you were talking about guys wanting to do too much or do stuff that doesn't make sense. I've asked some veterans, like the older school veterans that we've had on this show, but you've been doing this 10 years and you're a pretty established name. I mean, you know, I was super excited when we booked you. I'll put it to you that way.
Yeah, I mean, he's on the Uncut show, so he's obviously
got to be
somebody.
A star by now, right?
Yeah.
But do you think that that's a product of the fact that what garners interest these days? And I go back to not saying anything bad about Alex Zane, but like Alex Zane gets booked in Japan, and the reason he got noticed was because of the 630 senton over the top at the Backyard Wrestling Show. Do you think it's a product of stuff like that, where it's more of a what cool gift can I make of this match versus what kind of story can I tell with this match?
It's a product of a lot of things, I think, because the idea of wrestlers doing too much and doing cool shit for the sake of doing cool shit, that was talked about when I broke in, and I'm sure it was talked about even before that. I'm sure it was talked about before the Hardys were even a thing. I mean, pro wrestling at its core has always been about spectacle. You know, storytelling comes in because spectacle is only effective so many times in a row. It's the Tom Pritchard analogy of two elephants fucking. If you walk outside and see two elephants fucking, that's pretty mind-blowing the first time. And then the next day you come outside and those two elephants are still fucking. You're like, huh, they're still going at it. And then by the third day, you're just like, yeah, there are those two elephants fucking. Like, yeah. The main reason I think that the lack of storytelling direction, the over putting 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag, as it were, in matches, I think that's a result of independent wrestling being a 1 to 4 time a month thing, as opposed to, we watch on television, they've got weeks to have 8-minute matches where they do some stuff, and they build to a pay-per-view match where they do more stuff, and then they build to one of the big 4 pay-per-views where they do all of the stuff. I know it was certainly part of my mentality, and I was lucky to notice it as early as I did, that for an independent wrestler, every weekend it's kind of WrestleMania to you. For one, because you don't know necessarily when you're going to come back to this company. This company runs once a month as opposed to 4 times a month. And you're always trying to move up. You want to prove that you can do these, because everyone talks about all the classic matches throughout history. It's, Benoit Angle from the 03 Rumble. It's the Iron Man match with Shawn and Brett.
I love that that's the first thing you said. That just made my night.
It's Steamboat and Macho Man, or Steamboat and Flair, but when we talk about these classic matches, and the matches we want to have, we forget about like the buildup and what it took to make some of those great spots matter.
Months of stuff. Yeah,
exactly. And then you'll try to, and I've done this before when I started really focusing on like work rate style matches, is I'd go out there and I'd try to tease certain moves or treat them as a big deal, establish them that way in the match, but they hadn't been established leading up to that. You're trying to tell too much story. You're trying to cram too much narrative into not enough time. I think that's a symptom of it, is guys were trying to have their WrestleMania match every weekend. And to some crowds that'll fall flat, but then a hardcore wrestling fan will see that, who has seen a bunch of wrestling, and they'll go, man, that's insane. And that's how you get guys like Ricochet blowing up, and like how you get a lot of the early 2000s like ROH guys that kind of took off, because they were having those big time matches and doing these spots that happen once or twice a year in all their matches. And it was blowing people's minds because they were getting to see it more often. And I think you see over time, it does lose its effectiveness to an extent. You see it a little bit with like the ebb and flow of deathmatch popularity over the last 15 or 20 years. The death matches will be really popular and then they'll kind of fall off. People will have seen it all, and then a new batch of fans will come in and they'll be enraptured by the spectacle of death match. And you see that a lot now, and especially with the internet and just the fact that better wrestlers are doing death matches than we're doing them even 20 years ago for the most part.
Right.
So the storytelling is better and the wrestling itself is better, and it's gate kept better. There's a lot less just untalented people mutilating themselves, and it's a lot more talented guys who are also mutilating themselves.
Well, yeah,
I agree, but legit, like guys you respect, like Akira and John Wayne Murdoch and almost anyone that ICW would use, But I think that's part of that. We were talking about the story being lost in favor of the spectacle, the cool moves and stuff. Now, you can't discount the market for that kind of stuff. I remember when I was writing to FIP with the Hooligans 5 or 6 years ago, Gabe Sapolsky was telling guys at FIP, get the gifts. We are wrestling for gifts. That's our business model right now. This is when gifts were just really taking off. And I think that's why GCW is as good as it is. I don't know. I don't watch GCW shows. I don't have enough expendable income to watch choppy fight feeds, but I don't think GCW is having the best matches in the world per se. From my point of view, what I like in matches, as much as they have some of the best athletes and some of the best spectacles that wrestling has, Brett Lauderdale knows how to spot people and things that are going to draw outside eyes in. And that's important in wrestling. And that's something I've never been particularly good at, because I grew up a wrestling fan. I like wrestling for wrestling fans. I think that's why I like Japanese wrestling so much, because they're not too worried about how are we going to get fans of crime dramas and dancing shows and celebrity wife swap to watch us.
Yeah.
It's how can we service the fans that support us? How can we get their continued support? And that's more the wrestling I do. I wrestle more for wrestling fans. And I have to acknowledge there's kind of a ceiling on where I can go if that's my style, but it's weird because when I was growing up wanting to be a wrestler, I never thought of I want to be an entertainer.
Right.
As weird as that is, I had ideas for gimmicks and storylines and stuff because I do think, even if I didn't realize it, the story and narrative is what really interested me in wrestling as much as the cool fights. But I'm really good, I think, at storytelling within the context of wrestling. As a generally unlikable guy in real life, I don't have a lot of appeal to just like I don't know, that's just not who I am. I've never been a person who's been determined to convince people to like something they don't like. This is what I do. If you don't like it, fine. But if you do, I appreciate that and I respect it. And I think that's one reason a lot of my support comes from tenured wrestling fans, like older people, and a lot of kids too who are newer wrestling fans. Like that seems to be some of the markets I corner. I know I'm kind of getting off topic here, but I'm going a lot of places. But
we've interviewed Carrie Awful. It's fine.
Yeah.
I love Carrie. I mean that with all due respect.
You have to start anything you say about Carrie Awful. You have to start it with "I love him" because it's
it's gonna immediately be followed. But that guy never knows when to stop. No, but anyway,
but back to GCW. Brett Lauderdale is like, again, I don't watch their matches, but Joey Janela, you got to credit him with a lot of stuff. Like he knows who to put in the clusterfuck if someone's going viral. They book those Walmart guys because a lot of people who were lapsed fans or weren't fans were seeing them do wrestling moves on TikTok and getting millions of views. And I can think I'm as good as I want at wrestling. None of my matches have millions of views. Right. None.
Yeah, so I made this comparison with TJ Vegas. We were talking a few weeks ago, and I look at ICW and GCW, and it's very much. I hate to put it this way, but I think you'll understand what I mean. It's very much like NWA and WWF was late 80s, early 90s on a death match version.
Yeah.
I think ICW is very much pushed to, hey, wrestling fans, here's some guys who are going to beat the shit out of each other, but they're going to really entertain you.
Right.
And GCW is very, here's this over-the-top crazy shit, and we're also going to have people bleed, which is fun for you guys, right?
Yeah.
And Brett is really good at taking advantage of, like you said, the internet. Everybody wanted to see Colon and Murdoch. It was the match everybody talked about. When we had Murdoch on, we talked about it. And he was like, okay, I'm going to eventually give it to you, and we're going to build it. And he built it. I mean, one of my favorite storylines of the last year has been the way they built Colon and Murdoch, because they made me, who was in the business, fully hate Alex Colon for throwing Murdoch's bag at him.
I mean, my buddy Sam Stackhouse has busted his ass in Oklahoma for as long as I've been wrestling. I met him in 2012. And he's always done hardcore stuff, and he's always been a big dude that's done wheel kicks and moonsaults. And he just started posting on TikTok, and it took someone like Lauderdale to see that and go, hey, that's money left on the table. And Sam's
put him against Matt fucking Cardona.
he's driven all over the country, but Brett Lauderdale's like, hey, you're in Oklahoma, come be on our Houston show. And he's gotten over huge, and now he's making his living off wrestling. And and like, this isn't a dig at Sam at all. He's not a much different wrestler than he was 5 years ago. It's not like he's been out hitting seminars and working, he's been working mostly the same people for about 5 years. And like, he'll even say it himself, like, as of like last year, he's kind of just like, not necessarily, like, I don't want to say on his way out, but he didn't wrestle near as much because he'd wrestled everyone in Oklahoma. He'd had all these matches. He's got a wife and a kid to support, but now he's out there and he's getting flown places. He's getting big paydays, and all it took was a stage. All it took was someone saying what everyone in Oklahoma could see from Sam. Right. So, I mean, you can't discount that, because first and foremost, like, the job is to sell tickets. Like, there can be all this lovely art house wrestling that you want, and like, there's a market for that, and if that's what you're into as a wrestler or a fan, God bless you. But Brett Lauderdale's in the sports entertainment business, it seems.
Yeah, for sure.
And no independent company's bigger. I mean, that dude ran Hammerstein Ballroom. So
Exactly.
like, I don't want it to sound like I'm shitting on GCW at all, because it's important to take note of like the differences between ICW and GCW, because I don't think ICW is a lesser fed by any stretch of the imagination. But I think that NWA WWF comparison's a really good one, honestly.
Let's talk about promoing. How did you learn how to promo? What were your influences promoing? Was it easy to promo?
Man, I still don't consider myself good at promos.
You sound like I was gonna say you're a good talker, dude. You talk well.
I'm a good talker, and those are my best promos. Are kind of when I hate stand up. Like if I'm in the house by myself and I'm like, all right, I got to talk about this match, because then I have too much room to think. It's freedom is the enemy of creativity. Yeah. When you have endless options, you get choice paralysis. Yeah, exactly. When it's time to go out there and talk live, and I know what I'm going to say, it's easier because I got to talk, and then I can go like, you got to wrap it up. You got to talk to this guy right now. I don't have time to just think about it. Because that's my problem with promos. I will think about it, and then I don't want to put too much in there. I want to have like, well, I'd like it if it went in this direction, but man, I really want to work this line in. But then if I work this line in, I've got to build to it, and then some of them have come off really good. But there have been promos that should have been really good and weren't, because, for lack of a better term, they were overproduced in my brain. But I have found my groove a little bit more here lately. For like the first 5 years of my career, I didn't have a gimmick, which is, it can make it harder, it can make it easier. I am a big fan of attitude/ruthless aggression era promos, where you've got your catchphrase. When I study promos, I study The Rock. Like, he says nothing, but he says a lot of stuff, and it's his cadence, and I'm a big fan of the call and response stuff. And The Rock doesn't have a gimmick. He's a personality, not a gimmick. But I didn't really have a character, so figuring out catchphrases that made sense and weren't just random, and that was tough. But then also, when you do have a character and a gimmick, it can point you in a direction. And the mercenary stuff for a long time, like, that was the first character that I really kind of committed to. And when I was the Diamond Dogs with Luke, and when I was just Graham Bell, I had Get the Job Done. I had Another One Bites the Dust. I had By Any Means Necessary. But even then, I would get in my head about like the little nuances of my character. Because in my head, like, he was a mercenary. He didn't respect anyone, even if he was heel or face. He was only in it for the money. He didn't care about wins or losses. I was like, I've got to figure out a way to get each and every one of those things across in every promo I do. And it would just come out a jumbled mess for the most part. With this new character that's based off war criminals, basically, I can just, for one, it's easier to ramble, because that can just be kind of part of the gimmick. But I think creating my own manifesto philosophy and Marxism makes it easier. I've got these talking points: a meritocracy, you're dissident, you have to pay your dues, stuff like that. And so, man, just with promos, for me, it's easier, like you said, when I can just talk. So I can talk like this all day. And you ask anyone who's been in a car with me, I can cut a hell of a promo on fucking Green Kids in the Car. I see Derek all the time, because he's a fucking airhead stoner, and he'll say some of the just out there dumbest shit. And like, I'm really good to it, like just creating bits and going with bits. And kind of having that looseness and that freedom once I've been able to kind of work that into promos and stuff, they're better. That's the convoluted answer that I came up with there.
One more segue question to that, dude. Greatest babyface promoer ever?
In my opinion?
Yeah.
John Cena.
Yep.
Yeah.
Gotta be.
I agree with that.
I forget what it was. There was a promo. It may have been when he was feuding with Rusev. It may have been some other bad person who was bad because they're not from here. But he had some promo about just how much he fucking loved America. And it was just, he stood in the ring and had like 5 minutes to talk. And I was like, God damn, this is fucking good.
Yeah.
Cheesiest, most cornball shit. And this goes back to the most important thing about any promo is Cena believes it.
Oh, yeah.
That's why Cena could be a white meat babyface in an era where you couldn't be a white meat babyface. Because we've all been on shows where a guy will come out and go, come on, let's go. And you're just like, this guy's trying to.
Yeah.
But
this guy's about to get murdered.
It's like Rocky Maivia.
We also know people who are like that, that's who they are. Maybe they are a little cheesy or corny, but that's legit who they are. That's genuine. And Cena could be that white meat guy genuinely. And so that, I think that's why it resonated more with people.
So we talked earlier about gimmicks versus personalities. What was the impetus to go from Graham Bell, with the bazooka and the whole thing, and really just switch it all up and be like, fuck that, I'm Merc now?
There were a couple things. I really credit Mose with me pulling the trigger on it. Mose has always been a good one for me to bounce ideas off of and stuff, but it was a bit logical progression. It was it's time for me to do something else and a few things, because the mercenary thing I came up with as a tag team. It was supposed to be me and my tag partner, and we were essentially supposed to be Cable and Deadpool. And he never quite got the hang of the straight man side of things, which is hilarious because when we're around each other, he is very much the straight man, and he's very good at it. And his humor is very funny. It's very dry. But it's one of those things when you get in front of a camera and you're trying to overthink it, you lose a lot of that. It's the same way I wasn't a very good Deadpool when we were in front of a camera, but I'll be fucking way out there and cracking up when we're just in the car. Then I went to singles, and I still kind of tried to keep that. Then I found out I'm much better as an ass kicker than a comedian, which I credit Brett Eisen with giving me that realization, because he was one of the first guys to treat me credibly as a striker and world beater type. And then the mercenary thing was also a little bit rooted in reality, because it's like I said, I would go to all these places and really none of them were home. I'd go to SUP, I'd go to Battle Club, I'd go here and there in Tennessee, Oklahoma, Kansas, and I'd show up and I'd do what they asked me to do, and then I'd go to the next town. And I was good at it, but I wasn't the star. And it came to a point, because I had that gimmick, I think I even started wearing like the long pants and the goggles and scarf iteration of it for like 3 years. And I plateaued a little bit. I was doing well at TWE. I'd finally found a home base where I was able to move up the card and be a main eventer and be a star there and in that sphere. And I'd had in my head for a long time, for almost like close to 8 years now, honestly, I'm a big anime fan. And there's this archetype in anime called Bancho, and they wear these trench coats just kind of over their shoulder, and they have these caps, and they're just kind of these badass gang leaders, for lack of a better term. It was a combination of, I like that aesthetic, and I really, for some reason, I latched onto the word despot at some point. When I first heard that word a few years ago, I was like, that's a badass word. I had to look it up. I didn't know it meant like a tyrant dictator. I was like, despot, that's cool. So with that word and that aesthetic, I kind of formulated this look in my head, and it was really supposed to be more of like a WrestleMania entrance for just Graham Bell at first. That's how it was really just based around the aesthetic. But I talked to Mose about that look and about that. He's like, that's good. That's a good, no one's really doing that. And then the more I just kind of let it simmer under the surface is where I came up with some of the more character aspects of it. It was that and the show on Netflix, How to Be a Tyrant, which I really liked, because I could relate a lot of it to wrestling in a lot of ways. And then there were certain actual frustrations that I could channel. And like, I don't want to sound bitter, but you know, it can be tough when I have people telling me I'm having great matches and I'm killing it. I'm a very good professional wrestler. And there will be people that get booked because of the internet following they have, who aren't as good of wrestler, who haven't worked as hard or as long. And I will acknowledge, again, like we've talked about GCW, it's a business. You go with what sells tickets and what makes money. You know, like, it can be frustrating, but that's on my end. But I knew I could channel that into a character. And the impetus of the character is really that it's a hypocrite. I'm sick of all these people that don't want to work for what they have, that are taking shortcuts to get it, that exploit people. And then I'd have these henchmen come out with me that I would exploit, and I would make this content to get me ahead. And just like any good dictator, I'd be a hypocrite. And if anyone called me on it, they're shunned, they're dissident, they're re-educated, shunned. That was an on-the-fly thing. I had not planned that. And then the fighting grant at TWE had said something to me. I was like, everyone stop and shun the dissident. And they booed. They didn't do it. But Mose really put it over on commentary. It's like, we just saw public shunning. I'm going to keep that. And then I did it because the first time I did the gimmick and Honest, I'd started using some of the verbiage and stuff when I was still coming out in just the camo pants and the coat and goggles. But when I debuted the new look at Southeast First against Tangra, I was like, hey, I'm going to shun you. Then shun me back. And it worked like a charm. And that's what the spot was supposed to be. And then they turned me face at TWE, and I started shunning heels. And the whole crowd just right there with me, just like.
That's a money thing right there.
There's a T-shirt in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Man from last night was the very open where I was like, Jaden, help me out here. All right, Brett. You get Brett Eisen to shun with you.
That's a victory.
But so, like, to kind of compress that answer to make it possible for a human being to follow, I'd had the idea for the aesthetic and the name, and then I channeled some like real life frustrations about how good I believe I am, and the reasons I'm not at positions I want to be in, and to come up with the Generalissimo, to come up with Merksism with this regime and use that as character. And I've gotten just incredible feedback from it. I'm really surprised it's worked as well as a face as it has in TWE. It's great going somewhere because instantly you come out with henchmen and, a fucking trench coat and that officer's cap. It's easy to get booed. And I've got the henchmen to interfere. I've got, like I said, the verbiage, and I can ramble really good in that character because I can kind of turn it off. I can not turn it off, but I don't have to overthink it as much because I can use some of those real frustrations. People haven't paid their dues, getting what belongs to me, getting what belongs to you, loyalists. Aren't you sick of these people who haven't paid dues like you have, who haven't put in the miles, who haven't put in the work, who haven't set up the rings, getting these opportunities that belong to you? Well, I'm working for you. And then I'm not working for them. I'm exploiting them for me.
Usury. Well, I got two more questions because I know this is probably going to be my last chance, dude. Real quickies. Do you have any pre or post match rituals? And your family, dude, family and friends, what do they think about what you do? Especially maybe family and friends that, well, of course you had family before, but maybe friends that you grew up with that before you were a wrestler who know you now still.
I don't have any pre or post match rituals. I just never have. I don't have anything that I do every time without fail, like before or after. I'm not even good about stretching every time before I go out, unfortunately. It just really, it depends on what I do and where I'm at. But I've noticed I'm one of the few guys that doesn't seem to have any kind of like pre or post match ritual.
That's your ritual then. You don't do shit. That's your ritual.
Your ritual is you just hang out and wait for your shit to happen.
Yeah, that's your thing. It's a thing. You got one now.
Friends and family are they're cool, to put it like just easily, bluntly. A lot of my family on my dad's side they were more skeptical about it when I started, but I think the fact that I've stuck with it for 11 years and I'm not out on the streets and I'm not a fucking bum, even if they don't get it. And luckily, like, I'm good enough that when I drag them, I am able to like show them stuff I've done. It's good. Cause that's always like been something I've wondered about, is like some of these terrible little wrestlers from the Oklahoma and Tennessee indies that are never any good. Like, do they just show their family this terrible match they had? And like,
well, Tennessee indies, most of the terrible wrestlers are the ones that bring their families to the show. So
that is a valid point. That's a little different in Oklahoma. I don't think the families are supportive to come. So Tennessee got those family connections.
Tennessee, half the time, the shittiest guys on the show are the ones that brought 12 people.
Yeah, do it, brother.
That's why they're booked.
Yeah.
And my friends think it's cool because I haven't made a lot of new friends as an adult, thank God. But most of the friends I grew up with, like, they knew that I wanted to be a wrestler, and they heard me talk about it since I was, and they see me doing it, and like, I got a fair amount of shit even from them for it, but like, that was them in high school and stuff. I think as adults now, a lot of them with kids of their own, they see someone doing what they said they were gonna do when they were 5, and they think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, absolutely.
It's pretty positive. I'm making, it's something that can help support my household now, which is like, that adds a lot of validity to it. And again, like, it's taken me to Japan and Mexico, to Arena Mexico and Korakuen Hall, and hopefully other places very soon.
Well, that is one last thing I wanted to ask you about before we close it out. What was the process of getting to Japan, and what are some of your favorite memories? Obviously, wrestling Korakuen Hall is ridiculous. What are some of your favorite memories of being over there?
The process of getting there was really dumb luck in a lot of ways. I was at a weird kind of point in my singles career because I felt like at the time in my head, I'd kind of hit a dead end with a lot of the connections I'd had. I'd hit up the places I wanted to be and had been given no's for the time. And I'd kind of moved on from other places, and I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I was like, okay, so I'm kind of at a stagnant point. And then it just so happened Wrestle One was going around the country doing these tryouts. And I saw them. I was like, $150. Then you got to get yourself over there. I was like, probably not. And I passed on it. And then I saw Bob Evans post, and Bob's a guy that I respect tremendously, and he's helped me a lot. I've done a lot of his seminars. And I saw him just post something. I was like, everyone says they want to go to Japan. Well, here's your chance. Don't not go and then talk about how bad you want to go to Japan. I was like, well, fuck, he's got me there. So I paid the tryout fee, and I went to the closest one to me, which was in Kansas, Salina, Kansas, hosted by XWE. Shout out XWE and Billy Simmons and that whole crew. And I went into it with another Bobism in my head, is that I wasn't going to go there as an audition. I wasn't going to go in and do what I thought they wanted me to do. I was going to go and be Graham. And if they liked it, great. And if they didn't, oh well. And they liked it. And so I got a week of free training at the Wrestle One dojo. I had to get myself over there. Shout out my dad for getting me over there. That was something I was pretty self-conscious about for a long time, and I know a lot of people are, but I don't think anyone should ever be embarrassed or self-conscious about their support system. No one successful has ever done it on their own. I don't care how much they say they have. If they're too ignorant or blind or self-absorbed to realize the kind of help they had, that's on them. But no one's done it on their own. In some form or fashion, everyone's had help. Someone's had to go to bat for you at some point in some way or another. But flew over there. I had busted my ass to get ready for the training they do over there, and it was intense, but I was ready for it. And the whole experience was just really great because we had to do some of the young boy duties, but they knew we were workers, and they treated us as we helped clean, and we helped cook some, but like we didn't have to they didn't beat the shit out of us like in the trainings and stuff. And we did see a dude have his first like training match over there, and he did get the shit beat out of him. But besides that, it was really cool having Sonny Ono as like your kind of chaperone over there. He's a guy who's been all around, and Sonny's a big collector. We got to see all of these, just like we got to go into like the non-public collection room of the guy that like makes the Tiger mask and Jushin Liger masks, and see all the masks he's collected. And he's got like Kamen Rider masks and stuff in there. And he gave all of us a business card that if we need a mask made, we can go to him. And again, like this dude like makes Jushin Thunder Liger's masks. And so that was cool. We had a day off. We went around and we went to the New Japan store, and we got to sign the wall out the New Japan store. We went to Ribera. We did not get our jackets because they stopped just handing them out like a few years ago for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But we ate at Ribera's, which was dope. We saw all the wrestlers that had like autographed their photos and had them up there, and the ceiling was just covered in them. Obviously, like you said, the coolest part was wrestling in Korakuen Hall, and it's everything you want it to be. It's like being in a shrine, in a very holy place when you're in there, because it's not. I mean, you can tell on TV it's not big, but when you're in there, I'm not even going to say it feels big, but it feels important. But in this weird, humble sense, like I said, it's very religious in that way, as this is an important space. It's not grandiose in itself. Like, it's really hard to describe. It was like, right. This is a holy place. It's important because of how people treat it. Not just like it doesn't treat itself that importantly. But wrestling there was a dream come true. Like, to an extent, like no one can tell me shit. Like, I've always had like self-esteem issues as a wrestler because I've always thought I was good, but like I said, I'm not very good at the business side and the politicking side, so I'd get self-conscious not being on these bigger shows. But I've wrestled in Korakuen Hall. No one can tell me I'm not a good wrestler if I've wrestled in Korakuen. They don't let bad wrestlers in, you know. But probably the coolest thing we did besides that was the next day. Sorry, my jaw's popping. The next day, Tatsumi Fujinami via Sonny had invited our class to his tradition show that was there, and it was the Masa Saito 40th anniversary show. And the main event was, let me try and remember these teams because I'm fucking bad at it. It was Saito, Fujinami, and Liger against, maybe Saito was on the heel team. I don't remember. Against Tenzan, and I can never remember the two other guys. I'm going to have to look this up. I feel like a fucking shithead. But Liger was on one team with Fujinami. Tenzan was on the heel team, and the special guest referee was Masahiro Chono.
Oh, nice.
And this is October of 19. This was 3 months before Jushin Liger retired at Wrestle Kingdom. And I got to watch him live in Korakuen Hall. And that was just fucking insane. And the finish was, Muda was on the Tenzan, Muda, and another guy. And I think Saito. And then the face team was this one guy. It was Liger and Fujinami. And the finish was Chono quit babyface and the babyfaces, and there was an NWO Japan reunion. They had Fujinami in the middle of the ring, and they did like shining Yakuza kick, shining wizard combo on Fujinami. Nice. It was the fucking ever. But that was the big one, but also just being friends with people there. We went to Killer Khan. We went to his izakaya, and izakayas are just kind of these little like hole in the wall bars. They serve like appetizers and drinks. But we were his guests there, and he told me my Japanese was very good. It was not, but it was kind of him to say so.
Is Killer Khan still alive?
Yeah.
Dude, we got to get him on the show.
I'll hit him up.
Yeah.
I don't have it. I'm sure I can get it from Sonny.
There you go.
I'm always pandering for guests.
It's a weekly thing. It's just part of his deal. So when it's all over, when your wrestling career is said and done and you're trying to live a normal life as you can, how do you want people to remember you?
I just saw someone who left it better. I mean, that's what it is all in the end. Like everything fades. Like, not like all the biggest stars of wrestling from the 40s, like they're barely remembered. Like no one really talks about Orville Brown. They barely talk about Lou Thez anymore. Yeah. But I mean, eventually people aren't going to talk about John Cena the way they do. That'll be someone their grandpa talked about. Yeah. Same with Stone Cold. It's all going to go that way eventually. But the things that won't go away are how they impacted the business. And like I've come to grips at a certain point. Like I'm 30. WWE is back on their bullshit of not hiring anyone over 30, and you know, I can get a pretty good scope of the landscape. Like the chances of me being world champion for a major promotion are pretty slim. And 5 or 10 years ago, that would have really bothered me because it was all I wanted to do when I was a kid growing up. And it's not that I'm going to stop trying my best or competing at a world championship level like I do constantly, but it's not having my entire self-esteem wrapped up in wrestling. I've got a wife and I've got kids, and it doesn't matter if I'm the worst wrestler on earth or if I'm just one of 1,000 wrestlers for people to go see. I'm their dad. Like, that's where the self-esteem is going to come from, you know, in a true sense. I'm already proud of what I've done, because how many people do for 10 years even, like, or for 1 year even, let alone 10, what they said they were going to do when they were 5 years old. Like, people talk about, like, I got to live my literal childhood dream. Yeah. It looks very different than I thought it would, but I got to do it. But I mean, that's what they always say, is that you got to leave the business better than you found it, because it's going to come to an end for everyone. And again, if you just take, what's there? You know, I want someone to look at wrestling the way I did when I was 5.
Yeah,
I want to just come here to fucking jerk myself off. You know,
for sure, man.
Maybe I didn't realize it when I was 5, but all I wanted to do is tell these epic stories my whole life. And you know, I really, as much as I traveled with the Hooligans and as much as they gave me, and now I've got kids that are between like 19 and 21 years old who are in their first few years of wrestling, traveling with me and asking me for advice, and you know, watching my matches and telling me they watched me when they were in like middle school and stuff. Like, it's a big responsibility. It's something I wish I'd had when I was at their stage, and I don't take it lightly. Because I know how offended I would have been if someone had taken it lightly, if that had been me, or if my daughters want to be wrestlers and someone's going to take that lightly and not take it seriously. So it's a huge responsibility. And that's, you know, such a small fraction of people in wrestling are going to be stars at any measure, but everyone can leave it better, you know? And so that's someone who left it better, even if like it's not my name that gets remembered.
That's awesome.
I have this weird feeling that me and you were on an SWF show and it just hit me. Anyway.
Probably. I worked the Gypsy Show more than a few times.
Well, no, like I think you rode with the Hoolies the night my brother and Mike Jablonski wrestled them in a 3-way tag with IOU. Probably crazy. But yeah, sorry.
No, you're good.
It's 2 weeks in a row I got to bring that match up.
You are.
Anyway,
Nick is a pimp, I swear.
Dude, I will whore myself out until I get booked again. Anyway. So last segment of the show is always the same, man. I'm going to give you full screen, pitch your socials, pitch your upcomings, whatever message you want to send to the people, man. This has been a blast. I knew it would be. So I'm glad to have you on, man.
Great stuff, dude, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
Facebook is still Graham Bell for some fucking reason. Twitter, Instagram, everything else. I think even my Venmo and Cash App is at Merxist Leader. Actually, the Venmos and Cash App are at Merxist Regime. Upcoming, the most important thing I've got upcoming right now, well, next week I'm in Classic City Wrestling at Athens, Georgia against Noah Hossman for my debut there. And then after that is TWE's first ever live stream on IWTV.com. sink or swim, I will be defending the TW title against Tank, the Bloodbath Behemoth, in a boot camp match. It's a long time coming for this independent promotion. TWE is the very embodiment and spirit of independent wrestling. We don't have the biggest stars, the biggest budget, or the biggest building, but what we have is a lot of people with a dream who are working their asses off to be the very best professional wrestlers they can. And that's what independent wrestling has always been about, the future of this sport. And I'm very proud to represent them as champions. So please tune in to Sink or Swim on June 11th and watch me versus Tank in the boot camp match for the TWE Championship. After that, I will be at ICWF in Republic, Missouri, competing in the 7 Stars tournament at their Masters of the Squared Circle event. After that, I'll be back in TWE, and actually June 24th, the day before that, I'll be at Joe Kazana Promotions in Sweetwater, Tennessee. My July is looking pretty light, but I'm filling up the calendar for August. So stay tuned to all those socials that I pitched to you, at Merxis Leader on Twitter and Instagram, as well as TikTok, trying to get into that sphere and keep up with everywhere that Merxism is going and all the borders that the regime is going to cross.
Oh shit, I hit the wrong button. I'm so bad at this.
Fuck up.
Dude,
Nick.
I know. I'm the worst. I'm still green as give shit, man. I'm only a year into this podcast thing. Merk, man, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, brother.
We say it all the time. We got to do a
Good luck.
part 2 for sure.
Absolutely, man.
You guys have a good one. Thanks for having me.
Good night, brother.
The kids to bed. I got to go do the same thing.
All right. Y'all have a good
night.
Later.
I always say this to you. What a fucking nice guy, dude. Great guest,
guy.
Nick.
Super job. So hopefully the streak continues. Iggy was entertaining as shit. Merk was awesome.
Yeah.
We told y'all we had 2 this week. We're going to be right back in 2 days of TikTok and Twitch fame. Our buddy Matt's new best friend, Heel Kevin.
No way.
I know.
No.
Yeah. Heel Kevin going to be live on the Uncut podcast later on this week. This one's going to drop hopefully Wednesday. The Heel Kevin episode should drop Friday or Saturday. Going to be awesome. I want to hear all about this Heel Kevin Love Panda versus Pat McAfee and Tone Biggs golf clash that's coming. Hopefully. And we're going to talk a shit ton of wrestling with Heel Kevin this week. I want to talk about Double or Nothing. He has opinions on it. Robbie, have you watched Double or Nothing yet?
Do not yet, dude. But I was.
Well, you want to set aside a whole fucking day for this thing.
6 hours, right?
It was literally from the beginning. Okay, you could pretty much like 4.5 for the main show.
Right.
Because the pre-show was an hour, but there was only Hookhausen versus Smart Mark and Tony Nese. You could take or leave that. I mean, it was exactly what you expected.
Yeah.
But legit a 4.5 hour pay-per-view. I loved most of it. I'm sure we'll talk about that with Heel Kevin.
Yeah. I'm glad I didn't. I was going to bring at the beginning of the show. I was going to bring it up, but then you went right to the guest. So I'm kind of glad that we didn't really touch on it because we'll have a big discussion on Thursday. That's going to be cool.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a lot of fun on that episode. I mean, we had a lot of fun the last time. We had some TikTok guys on,
Yeah.
Willie Finesse and Petty Endo and Comic Punk Guy. I think this is just going to be another one. And Heel Kevin, his other best friend is another friend of the show, Zachy Monstar.
Oh, cool.
So I'm sure he'll have some great Zachy stories. Oh man, I can only imagine the stuff this guy could tell me about Zachy Monstar.
Going to be great.
I'm sure we're going to talk about real pro wrestling, but we'll get there. You got like 48 hours until you hear the episode.
I'm ready.
It's going to be awesome. We'll be here at the normal time, by the way, Robbie, so you don't have to worry about, being late to the show.
Well, I was actually early.
You were very early, although technically late, but it doesn't matter.
Right.
Anybody who doesn't know the inner workings of the show is so confused by that bit.
Woo.
But good times were had by all. Merk was fucking awesome. Definitely check him out. Check out fucking the live show, Sink or Swim, June 11th. He was right. That card is fucking stacked. TWE is killing it. Uncharted territory every Monday night where Merk is a big star as well. Live on IWTV. We're friends with the IWTV cats.
Oh, yeah.
We love them over here.
Absolutely.
I'm going to quit rambling. Robbie Cutthroat.
Yo.
I'm fucking tired. How many clicks is it?
1 and 2.
I hate you guys.